Help me. Anyone who is reading this. Someone. Please help me. Save me. Last month, a friend of mine took his own life. I believe it was because he heard his name called by it. Another friend of ours, in a desperate attempt to escape, shouted his name. Even though we were told not to speak, not to make a sound, so it wouldn't notice us. Now, the next one could be him. I followed the instructions and stayed silent. But the three of us were already chosen as sacrifices. If he dies, then it's my turn next. Someone. Please. Help me. I'm begging you. I'm terrified of the darkness. I'm afraid I'll see that blue light. I can't sleep. The three of us had been troublemakers since middle school, drifting through life without much purpose. But then, AG managed to land a job, and we knew that our time hanging out together was coming to an end. To mark the occasion, we decided to take a spontaneous road trip, setting off in my car without a real destination in mind. Let's go somewhere we've never been before, Nobuaki suggested. Fine, then you're driving, I said, stepping out of the driver's seat. That was the first mistake. Nobuaki, being who he was, turned the trip into a mess. Oh. Check out that hot chick. Let's follow her. Or, look at that guy's driving. I'm gonna tailgate him. Before we knew it, we were lost. Eventually, we ended up on an unfamiliar mountain road, where, of course, we crashed the car. It was totaled. And to top it off, there was no cell service. At least we were lucky enough to walk away with only minor injuries. Masaki, what now? Do we start walking? Eiji asked, glaring at Nobuaki. Yeah. Waiting here is pointless. No cars have come through in ages, and judging by the state of the road, who knows when the last one did. Seriously, Nobuaki, why the hell did you bring us here? Dude, we drove for, 2 hours straight. We must be over 100 kilometers from town. We'll never make it before nightfall. There's no way we can walk that far without light. Eiji, fed up, groaned in frustration. Nobuaki, who had been sulking, suddenly brightened up. Light. I've got one. He pulled out a Zippo lighter, only to be immediately punched by Eiji. You dumbass, Eiji yelled. Look over there. There's a utility pole. And power lines. There must be a village nearby. We can borrow a phone. With no other options, we followed the power lines into the forest, hoping to find help. What we found instead was an abandoned village. With no better plan, we decided to spend the night there. Entering any of the dilapidated houses felt too dangerous, so we gathered old scraps of wood in what looked like the village square and made a fire. The flames crackled, casting long shadows. We had no choice but to wait for daylight. Huddled together, we passed the time. Despite everything, that night was strangely fun. It was the last peaceful night of my life. On the second day, it rained. A torrential downpour. We had no choice but to take shelter inside one of the crumbling houses. No one spoke. It wasn't just the rain that made the atmosphere heavy. It was the growing sense of dread. It had only been 2 days, but already, the thought of death crossed my mind. In the modern world, 3 grown men starving to death seemed ridiculous. But there we were, trapped, cold, and with no food. A horrifying thought crept in: if we were pushed to the brink, would one of us turn on the others? Panic and despair set in. It rained all through the night and into the following evening. Even when it finally stopped, none of us moved. None of us had the will to move. Then, that night, he arrived. A lone monk. His robes were pristine, but his feet were caked in mud. He had walked here. None of us even noticed him approaching until he spoke. What are you doing here? Is that wrecked car down the road yours? Come with me. Now. His voice was deep but kind. It was the voice of salvation. Numb and exhausted, we stumbled out of the ruined house. The moon had come out, casting an eerie glow over the village. A full moon. You saved us. How did you know we were here? We were starting to think we wouldn't make it. Please, do you have any food? We haven't eaten in 2 or 3 days. I pleaded. The monk's expression darkened. This is a dead village. A village of the lost. The living stand out here, no matter where they hide. You were in grave danger. And you still are. I'm afraid. You were called here as sacrifices. I do have food. But I can't give it to you. I have others I must feed first. You'll understand soon. For now, follow me, and do not make a sound. We followed him to the village square. There, a fire was already burning, and a makeshift altar stood at its center. Offerings of food were placed on it. Food. Nobuaki spotted the offerings and rushed forward. "Stop!" The monk's voice boomed, freezing Nobuaki in his tracks. "You fool! Do not step any closer. Fall back, all of you. Now. You must stay behind this." He gestured to an enclosed area marked by 4 wooden stakes connected with what looked like a sacred rope. A barrier. A chill ran down my spine as we stepped inside. "Listen carefully," the monk continued. "This village suffered a terrible fate long ago. The people here. They starved to death. This place was so remote that it took over a day just to reach the nearest town. They had no electricity, no phones. When the famine came, no one knew, no one helped. Wait. But we saw power lines. That's how we got here." I interrupted. The monk frowned. "Power lines? Look around you. Where do you see power lines?" Under the moonlight, I finally took a proper look at the village. The houses were ruins. Roofs had caved in, overtaken by plants and moss. They looked more like small hills than buildings. There wasn't a single utility pole in sight. We had seen them before. But now, they were gone. My blood ran cold. Eiji suddenly grabbed my arm, his voice barely a whisper. "Masaki. Look at that. What the hell is that?" I turned toward the altar. There, hovering over the offerings, were 2. 3. No, dozens of small, glowing blue orbs. "Are those orbs? What the hell? There are so many." The monk's voice was grim. "Orbs? No. Those are hungry spirits. Gakidama. The remnants of those who starved to death here. They have become creatures of pure hunger. I come here every year to perform a ritual. Segakikuyo. A feast for the hungry dead. If I had arrived any later, you 3 would have been their next meal." The orbs slowly descended onto the ground. Then, they took shape. Thin bodies. Hollow eyes. Bloated stomachs. Tangled, matted hair. Men. Women. All of them emaciated, consumed by an eternal hunger. The offerings vanished suddenly, leaving behind only a single dark clump, something resembling a batamochi. We understood then. They had devoured it all. But could ghosts actually consume food? I turned to the monk and asked. "All that remains of them is hunger, the insatiable need to fill their bellies. They were once human, but now they are something else, monstrous. Their desire is so strong that it manifests physically. They are truly eating. But it is still not enough, is it? This will be the last of it." Saying this, the monk reached into a pouch hanging from his neck and began scattering something while chanting sutras. Looking closely, I saw it was rice. Za. Za. Para. 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 Carry. 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 Za. Za. Para. 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 Carry. 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 The spirits hungrily devoured the grains of rice, but they never diminished. They chewed, swallowed, yet the rice remained. One by one, the spirits shrank, their forms dissolving into small blue orbs the size of marbles, sinking into the earth. Eventually, not a single blue light remained. It is done. You may not have full bellies, but you have witnessed something few ever do. Be grateful. A human can go 2, even 3 days without food and survive. The people of this village suffered far more before they perished. Perhaps now, you understand their torment. At sunrise, someone from the temple will come for you. Endure until then. Ha ha ha. The monk laughed heartily. Nobuaki, however, looked at the last remaining batamochi and asked, "Well, since it's over, can we eat that one?" The air froze in an instant. "What did you say? Where is it?" The monk shouted, his face turning pale. Right there." Nobuaki pointed. "No. There is still one left? Could it be a stray?" The monk's voice wavered with fear. Unease crept over me. "What do you mean? I told you, these creatures exist only to consume. They do not leave food behind. If something remains, that means one still remains. The spirits here were dwindling with each annual offering. I had thought, in another 5 years, they would all be gone. But a stray." He swallowed hard. "A stray is one that has lived without offerings, feeding only on its own kind, the last survivor of its kind. A creature that is no longer bound to this place, a wandering beast. Something beyond control. Nearly a god of misfortune." Eiji suddenly grabbed my arm. He was trembling. Wordlessly, he pointed, past the batamochi, into the darkness. 2 glowing blue lights hovered there, side by side. Not floating. Not moving away. They shifted ever so slightly. from left to right. Not orbs. Eyes. Two shining, blue eyes. The fire crackled and sputtered, distorting the shadows. The creature came into view. It was just like the spirits from before, but bigger. The size of a grown man. It crouched low to the ground, hands pressed into the dirt, slowly crawling forward. Then, it reached out, grabbed the bottom mochi, and ate. All the while, its glowing eyes remained fixed on us. And that's when I knew, it could see us. Terror gripped me. I began to tremble. The monk spoke. "This is bad. It has called you. You are its sacrifices. That is why it sees you so clearly. My time has come. Listen. All of you, come here and bow your heads." He plucked a hair from each of us and muttered something under his breath before swallowing them. "I will step outside. And be devoured by it. You must stay here until the moon sets and the sun rises. No matter what happens, do not leave this space. And above all, do not speak. If it hears you, it will know you are here." With that, he stepped beyond the sacred boundary, chanting the same sutra he had spoken while scattering the rice. None of us stopped him. We were paralyzed. Overwhelmed with terror. "Monk. I'm sorry." The stray crept forward, slow and deliberate. Sniff. Sniff. The sound of it taking in his scent. The monk cautiously moved away from the boundary, maintaining distance. The creature followed, nose twitching. Then, it pressed its face against the monk's stomach and inhaled deeply. Sniff. Sniff. A sharp, acrid scent filled the air. Urine. The monk had lost control of his bladder. I had too. Likely, so had the others. Then. Slurp. The sound of flesh being pierced. The monk screamed. The stray had driven its teeth deep into his stomach. It shook its head violently from side to side. His intestines spilled out in a thick mass. Blood gushed from his mouth. He could not even cry out. He was being eaten, just 3 meters away from us. Rip. Squelch. Crunch. I shut my eyes and endured. The sounds didn't stop. Of course they didn't. The creature was eating enough for 3. The monk had taken our place. Suddenly, Nobuaki let out a shriek and tried to bolt from the barrier. He had reached his limit. "Nobuaki," Eiji cried, tackling him before he could escape. The stray paused and turned toward us for a moment. Then, uninterested, resumed feasting. Eiji and I pinned Nobuaki down, forcing him to turn away. He whimpered but did not resist. Time crawled by. Second by agonizing second. Eventually, the sky began to lighten. The creature had finally finished eating. I turned, trembling, to see it crouched, staring at the ground. Not a trace of the monk remained. Not even his clothes. Unlike the other spirits, the stray did not vanish. It lingered. Had it heard Eiji's voice? Was it waiting for us to leave? The monk had warned us, do not step outside until sunrise. We obeyed. The creature remained in place as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the mist. Slowly, its form began to fade, becoming translucent. "Disappear already." I screamed internally, willing it to vanish. Only 2 glowing blue orbs remained, its eyes. They lingered, staring. Watching. Who was it looking at? Just before it completely dissolved, I heard it. A whisper. Clear. Unmistakable. "Nobuaki." By the time full daylight broke, a younger monk had arrived. His eyes were piercing, unreadable, but he said nothing. He simply guided us back to our car and then to the site of the accident. Not long after, the police arrived to conduct their investigation. Once finished, they left without asking any questions. No one spoke of the dead monk. No one acknowledged him. As we were driven back to town, the young monk finally spoke. "Forget this place. And never return." On the way back, we passed 3 cars, each one occupied by monks. Even though nothing was said, it was clear. They knew. After that, the 3 of us barely kept in touch. Time passed. Eiji found a job but soon got into trouble and was fired. He returned to this town, unable to escape his past. Perhaps the trauma of that night had never left him. As for me, I still see it in my dreams. Nobuaki fared the worst. He deteriorated, mentally and physically. Institutionalized for a time, he finally took his own life last month. When I heard the news, all I could think was, of course. They said he wasted away, unable to keep food down, growing weaker and weaker. No matter how much he ate, he was never satisfied. Just like it. Because I remember. Before it disappeared completely. It called his name. Nobuaki.